All right, welcome back to the Kyle and Nick on Film, and today we're going to talk about another noir-y, kind of the 90s with all back to a noir movie, but one that has a little bit of cliches, and one of them fights cliches. So we're going to talk about Wachowski's first movie, Bound.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to discuss this one because if you guys have watched the Why I Love Cinema series that I ran while we were separated, you'll know that two of the films that showed up on there were films that are in my top 10 of all time, Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas. So I have seen every single Wachowski film except for Bound.
And if you were my age and if you saw Bound and this was the first Wachowski movie, and then you tell me that the path they were going to take after this, would be a little bit
definitely
surprised.
Takes a different route than what we expected to. But you know, it's always interesting to go back to basics and go back to like the first film of any great director or pair of directors. And I think that's what kind of makes this one more interesting is because we both came at it from reverse angles. You had seen it first and then moved on through the filmography. I'd seen it last after seeing everything else. So, so we're going to try and keep ourselves unbound, keep the conversation with you, and talk about Bound today on Kyle and Nick on Film. All right, Nick, so we're talking Bound today, the story of Violet and Corky.
Yeah, this is Wachowski's first movie, definitely made on a shoestring budget. Really simple set, like you were just mentioning before. It looks like they made the set first and then kind of the script second. Very, very dated. At the time, it was revolutionary. It was mind-boggling. And with the Wachowski's Bound, it's a story that's a little bit slow. It's advertised as a gangster movie, as an action movie, and it's definitely not of any of that. I think it's kind of one of those clickbait things. But the premise,
it's a tough film to kind of break down like genre-wise because it really takes a. I was like categorizing it with the wife we were talking about. And I was like, it's kind of an erotic thriller.
It was kind of that when you talk to your friends, you're like, oh, it's a steamy movie, but you gotta it's also a gangster movie. But it touches on like noirs, gangsters, comedies. It's kind of a little more screwball comedies and stuff like that. But we're talking Bound. I'm Nick Palodichuk from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle Goethe from GoetheFilmReviews.com.
And today we're going to talk about the Wachowski's first movie, Bound. What do you got?
So, okay. As said before, I've loved every single Wachowski film. I'm a big defender of the Matrix sequels. I was a big pusher for Sense8, the Netflix series that just didn't do very well. I'm hugely influenced by them as filmmakers. Bound for me was something that I felt was good, but I felt the datedness, not just in the visual sense of the film, but it, as we said before, it does feel like it's cliched, and I don't think cliched in the way where it created the cliches. I think it actually... There's a lot more I've seen this before in the film that I don't think can be taken away by doing a switcheroo and making the two romantic leads both women.
So, the beginning of the movie is definitely a gangster movie, and I think the Wachowskis were fighting the stigma of gangster movies like the Warner Brother movies of the 40s, where you have like James Cagney, you have Little Caesar, Public Enemy, Scarface, where the gangster is the focus and the female characters are pretty much not even really their wallpaper, their scenery. They don't really have a scene. And the gangsters are considered tough, they're smart, sophisticated. Here they're kind of bumbling, they're kind of idiots almost. And you have the two women who feel like they're trapped, which is kind of the title of the movie, is kind of like the theme, navigating a way to get out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you make about kind of the reversal here, because from what I was reading, both Jennifer Tilly, who plays Violet, and Gina Gershon, who plays Corky, were given crime films to watch, classic noir crime films to watch to prep for their characters, but they were told to focus on of course, the male characters that they would almost be embodying. And I find it interesting, too, that the Wachowskis took this screenplay to several studios. The studios said, make Corky a man and we'll take the film. And they said, well, we've seen that story before. And I do think like it is very interesting to flip the script on that. For me, it works later on in the film so much stronger than it works at the beginning of the film. I was very lost for the first 45 minutes of this movie. And I got what was going on, but going out of this, someone who doesn't know anything about the film, I was wondering, when is the story going to start? That was my whole thing. Was like, hey, you know what?
You have a story.
I'm all for what was going on in the first 40 minutes of the movie, but it didn't really feel to me like we were heading in a direction until there was this moment that the film completely changed about 45 minutes in, and then I was just into it from that point on.
So basically, the first act is pretty much almost like you're eavesdropping on a world, and not really providing any narration or something. You're just almost like an eavesdropper. You're just witnessing. It's almost like a documentary style. Just they're living their lives.
Yeah, and it feels that way. Like it feels like you're kind of involved. But I also felt too like it does do a lot of groundwork laying. Like there's a lot of hints, a lot of setup in that part.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's all stuff that could have been done a lot faster to really tighten up that beginning of the film, because I guess if you did not have these two, I think, solid performances, if you didn't have that, I think the film would be tough to keep people involved until it really hits the crux of its story.
So going back to what I was saying about cliches, is they're definitely using cliches of like the gangster wife, Jennifer Tilly, playing like this trophy glamorous woman, but she has some very complexities to her that they've written into that she knows that it's almost like she's playing a role, and she's actually a little more smarter than the guys around. And then you have Corky, who's actually playing more of a macho than really needs to be, and honestly it's a little overplayed, almost like you're surprised that this is actually a female character playing this role. In the late 90s, I think that was the emphasis, that they wanted her to act more manly than was presented, to kind of trick you.
Yeah, I think so. And Gina Gershon did this as well in Showgirls even too. She kind of played more of a hardened, tougher character, and she does that very well. She does. I just think
they played on that
they
whole
played on it a little bit
of,
heavily of the whole the fact that there are two women. I think it's such a central focus of it, and it's nice that it plays into the story in that no one would suspect them. I like that gives a little bit more clarity to some of the things that I think would kind of look silly if you didn't expect it going on. If Corky had been a man, for example, Joe Pantoliano's character would be onto them from the very beginning, and I think that's again kind of that idea, that these two women are leading a secret life, apart from everybody else.
So the whole point of the movie is kind of getting trapped. You're kind of bound to your stuff, your story, your marriage, and every stuff, and how are you going to navigate out of it? In fact, they play on the whole emphasis that Corky's actually in her closet, like hiding, literally hiding in her closet. The whole cliche of, can you help me fix my pipes? Where that, heard that, we see that the plumber coming in to fix pipe. We're here to play that cliche, but in their world, it has to be girl and mash up to girl to get out of the man world that they're in.
Yeah, and kind of and take a start that's less focused on their station as a secondary character to the male.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more feminist way, I think, to look at the film in today's climate than you could have in 1996. I think that has moved a lot more, and I saw a lot more of that interesting information. I had a lot of discussions with my wife about it after watching it, about kind of like how she viewed the two characters, the female characters versus the male characters, and I think it's surprising in that way. I think character is where the film wins.
One of them, if you notice it, if you haven't seen Bound, and you've seen a lot of Wachowski brothers, they're transitioned now, they're female now. If you see this movie now, you can see their meticulous detail to fashion and art direction.
Yeah, and
they love fashion and art direction, and very high stylized.
Yeah, and watching this film, knowing that they just immediately went to the Matrix afterwards, everyone looks like they're in the Matrix in this movie. Everyone's got the sunglasses, the long black coats, they're moving through it.
And then in fact, they use the same cinematographer, Bill Pope, award-winning cinematographer. He didn't do a lot of clever shots in this. They're pretty standard, but he got away with a lot of things like lighting. The lighting is fantastic in this for the budget they had.
And I think that's where he did use some pretty ingenious shots for the budget. There was this great sequence where they're on opposite sides of the wall and their hands are touching the wall. And the shot is not something we haven't seen before or since. Yeah. It's utilized very nicely. I like that the film opens with this stream of consciousness, kind of again, we're getting all these bits of information, but they're kind of thrown at you. I really like that sequence where Violet tries to call Corky on the phone, and we actually follow the phone call line through the line. It feels like
we don't need that anymore.
Yeah, it feels like something though that the Wachowskis would have done in one of their later films stylistically, and except it doesn't have that budget. Like they've always thrived with the big budget. They always thrive being able to throw money around and not make much on them. But yeah, Bill Pope, I know that he was influenced by Sin City, by Frank Miller's work, and you can see a lot of that in the tone, because it's a very I don't want to say muted tone, but it kind of shifts more towards a lot of blacks, a lot of whites.
Yeah, in the late 90s, the fashion of earthy tone, high fashion, it definitely a metallic, high earthy tone colors was used and very well presented in this movie.
Yeah. Well, and I think even Violet's character too, she's a little bit paler. She's she's not tanned out, and of course they're not in a very tan-centric, sunny kind of environment, but still like a lot of mute to it, a lot of singular black and whites. Even the paint thinner that we get to see is just this large white canvas on the floor at one point, and like there's a lot of that kind of like unique flipping of colors, and like that's again like I think Bill Pope doing what he can with what he has. Okay. What did you think about the actual like heist itself?
It's a little bit where you get to the third act of almost like a Marx Brothers bit, Alfred Hitchcockian, where it's the suitcase and who's handling the suitcase, and are they going to get away with it? Are they not going to get away with it? So you have this high tension, but it's a little bit more dash of comedy involved. So, and it's one of those that now we're going to the third act, it's a little more entertaining. It has that tension, that Alfred Hitchcock tension to it. Yeah,
I mean, the whole thing about a heist film or a trickery movie with crime is when is it going to break? When is the failure going to happen? And I really enjoyed that they kind of set up to you how this was going to work and how everything was going to play out. And to me, it felt like, okay, how is this going to break? Like, you could pause the film at that point and think like, okay, where are we going to fail? And how are we going to have to like reassess? And I think it's really interesting how it happens that the two characters are separated and have to kind of work not even together to try and figure out how to maneuver the situation. I think in the way that it fails is kind of interesting, and the fallout from that is very interesting because it's not something I expected. And then seeing again like how Violet, because really Jennifer Tilly takes over the film at about an hour in. Gina Gershon's Corky doesn't get to do very much. She's kind of just
like
there
I said,
listening,
she's presented her almost like a trophy wife, that there's nothing there, but she's actually a little more complex.
Yeah, so she gets a lot more to do with that. I think, you got your stoic characters. I love the sequence though where the three men are going to pick up the money, and he's fully aware of the fact that he's going to have to maneuver around, and Joe Pantoliano's character Caesar has to kind of work around these three big boss men who have come in to take the case. And part of that too is because I absolutely adore Christopher Maloney, who plays the son.
Yeah, he was
kind
pretty
of
much
the firecracker. Yeah, and like I love everything he does because he can play subdued, he can play intense, he can talk to a can of peas like he does in Wet Hot American Summer, and it's still just absolutely enthralling. So
when he came out, he was actually a nobody. It was one of those people like, oh, we don't know who this person is, because when it came out, we know Gina Gershon, we know Jennifer Tilly, we know John Pantoliano. Yeah.
So I think that the heist itself is strong in its initial execution. I do feel like as the film goes on, and it becomes a little bit more of a cat and mouse chase throughout this apartment complex, that it becomes a little bit more simplified, and maybe to a fault, where I kind of felt like a lot of the craft was lost in this chase sequence that takes place near the end of the film.
I agree with that.
So all in all, though, I did enjoy the film. It's still very much a thumbs up from me, a recommendation. I do think it's, again, more towards the kind of weaker of the Wachowskis, grandiose. I love when the Wachowskis go ambitious, and I feel like this film has ambition for a budget, and I prefer the films where they get a lot more room to play around.
I appreciate, they're now Lily and Lana Wachowskis, and definitely if you're a fan of Wachowskis, this is a movie you have to see. It's one of those, if you're a fan, you have to see it. And you started the start. This is the start of what you will see come from The Matrix. In fact, some actors come from The Matrix.
Yep.
I love that they actually invest more into style than content. They're very highly stylized films, and I appreciate that. A lot of times people concentrate on scripts and stories, but they've spent a particular amount of time of the look of really a tone, a theme to their movies that I appreciate.
Yeah, and I think having seen now so many of their films and having absolutely adored what they do, I really like how their focus is not on unique characters as much as it is on relatable characters. There's something you can find in a lot of the characters in this film and in every one of their movies, and I like that they do focus on creating a memorable effect, and the film is memorable
Yeah.
stylistically speaking.
Oh yeah, this is one of those you'll
remember.
remember that you've seen it. It's memorable. Well, I would say it's more unforgettable than memorable. You will never forget that you see this movie.
That's exactly, yeah. So overall, Nick, you still enjoyed it on a rewatch?
Yeah. At the time when it came out, it was like fresh, brand new. It was style and everything. But now it's a little bit dated. It's a little more nostalgia piece. It's a little more cookie cutout than I thought it would be when I rewatched it. But definitely worth a take to see.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So there are our thoughts on Bound, the Wachowski film that started off a great love that I've had for these filmmakers.
Yeah.
We want to know what you guys thought, though. Comment below. Let us know. Have you seen Bound? If you haven't seen it, go watch it. You have the time. And then come on back and give us your thoughts. Did you love it? Did you hate it? We want to get that conversation going with you. Also, don't forget to drop a like down there. You see that like? Give us a thumbs up. We really do appreciate it. You can also click subscribe to get more of our content every single week when we have new episodes of Kyle and Nick on Film coming your way. And Nick, we got a Patreon.
We have a Patreon. Check it out, please. Participate.
Yeah, the link is down in the description, patreon.com/Kyle Nick on Film. You can join us in that conversation right there and help come up with more ideas for films that you want us to talk about. Because I'm a pretty open book. I like to watch just about everything. So, thank you guys for joining us on that.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. You can find on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play.
And I am Kyle Goethe. You can check out my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com. I've got almost 1,000 film reviews on there, and I want to keep those coming for you guys. So thank you guys for reading, and thank you guys for watching.